On this episode of J&J Tabletop, we are continuing our series where we go over the top 3 subclasses, and we're going to be on the Warlock. We'll see which patron is the best. Stay tuned.
Well, hello there, and welcome back to another J&J Tabletop video. The way we're going to do this today is we're going to present our 3 candidates in alphabetical order, and we're not going to list what order we're putting them in until the very end of the video. Now, we do have these discussions in our Discord server, so if you want to join those, check our link tree in the description, and who knows, maybe the ones you pick will be in our Wizard video, which is, Josh, we're almost towards the end of the 2014 subclass series. So Josh, why don't you tell us a little bit about the criteria we use when we make this determination?
Really, we have 3 things. First is raw power. There's typically a combat emphasis on this because how else do you measure power typically, right? Second is, do these features enhance what the base class is doing or is trying to do? We're also going to take away points if it takes away from what the class is trying to do. The last criteria is the delivery on a fantasy. Does this sell you a fantasy? Does it get you excited about an idea? And does it actually deliver on that idea, right? I think that's important.
In terms of avoiding, we're looking to avoid anything that has overlap. If multiple subclasses kind of try to do the same thing, we're just picking the best one and the others are not qualified for the rest of the discussion. We also are avoiding role-playing because we believe every class and subclass has fun elements to it in terms of RP. And we might use that as a tiebreaker or maybe an honorable mention or something like that, but it's not a primary consideration. And then last but not least, we're going to avoid multiclassing because that would defeat the entire purpose of evaluating each subclass if you don't look at them as they are from start to finish.
Leading off the discussion, alphabetically, of course, we have the Celestial Warlock. This is your heavenly, godly, angelic warlock. In terms of raw power, we have Healing Light, which is just an action economy game changer.
Absolutely. It's very similar to the Dreams Druids feature of the Balm of the Summer Court, where you get a pool of healing dice, which is just a d6 equal to, I think it's 1 plus your warlock level. And when you're talking about limited spell slots that a warlock gets, and you're talking about maybe wanting to do 2 things that might be magical on the same turn, this feature empowers you to do that, right? You don't have to cast Healing Word because you can use this, and then you can still cast another spell if you want, or, Eldritch Blast something. The thing about this is that you can be both a support and healing character at the same time as you're probably dealing damage or controlling the battlefield, whatever you're doing. It seems like a small feature, and I feel like a lot of people don't talk about it, but we love the action economy here, and this really does change so much of what the Warlock can do and how effective they are. We love that. And now when we talk about enhancing what the Warlock does, it might be a little cheeky to pick this, but outside of trying to Eldritch Blast something, what do Warlocks want to do more than everyone else? Take a short rest. So when you talk about that, the Celestial Resilience actually gives you selling points to get that rogue who doesn't care about short rests to be like, hey, you know what, maybe I can get some temp HP. This is not so bad. It works pretty simple. You get your temporary hit points equal to your warlock level plus your charisma modifier, and then they nerf it for your friends. It's half your warlock level plus your charisma modifier. I don't know why they didn't just make it the same, but either way, it's a gift that kind of keeps on giving there.
Yeah, and then I guess that brings us to delivery on a fantasy, and it's a really good delivery on a fantasy. I mean, the expanded spell list, you have Cure Wounds, Revivify, Wall of Fire, and both Restorations, all of those fitting the theme of the Celestial. But you also have this really cool ability, the capstone feature, called Searing Vengeance. We've said it a million times on this channel. Jake and I are pretty big fans of Destiny, specifically Destiny 1. My go-to subclass, when I wasn't playing the Voidwalker, my go-to subclass most of the time was Sunsinger, and the cool ability that they had is if you died, you can just whoop and come back up and you're covered in fire and you have all these awesome things. Well, what does Searing Vengeance do? When you're at a point where you have to make death saving throws, instead of making that death saving throw, you can instead stand up, regain 50% of your total hit points, deal radiant damage to any creature within 30 feet of you. And then in addition to the damage, which is 2d8 plus your charisma modifier, those creatures are blinded until the end of your current turn. No save, they're just blind because of your radiant celestial glow light. I don't know.
Brilliance.
Yeah, brilliance. Yes, I love that.
Yes.
Either way, I think this is really, really good. And I think that ends it on the celestial. Kind of fun. Our next choice, a little bit of the opposite.
Polar
right?
opposite. Absolutely. Yeah, we're choosing the Fiend here, which is the most classic Warlock, right? I mean, the first image that comes to mind when you think about playing a Warlock is I made a deal with the devil and now I can do all these cool things. And when you talk about raw power, right off the bat, I like to look at the spell list. There's some solid choices. You think devil, you think fire, and it's got fireball and wall of fire, amongst other things. But those two are just very good bread and butter options. So when you look at how good Dark One's Blessing is, it's great for a damage dealer because the way it works is when you drop someone, you get temporary hit points equal to your charisma modifier plus your warlock level. So that's obviously going to be outstanding with Eldritch Blast, which is, we know that's the meme because that is the primary way they deal damage. And if you do some kind of Pact of the Blade option and you're up front, there's another great way to just have extra tankiness. And honestly, anything that gives you temporary HP or a path to temporary hit points every single turn, theoretically, when you get to like high level gameplay, like we're starting to play Eve of Ruin. If I had access to temporary hit points every single round, that really can be helpful. When you're like, hey, my warlock's level 11, I have 20 charisma, I dropped you, guess what? I have 16 temporary hit points to make the next time I get hit not hurt so much. That's really strong. And I feel like the raw power here is just baked into one of the first features you get, which I always love that. And then at level 10, you get Fiendish Resilience, which you could just choose resistance to a damage type after you finish a rest. You're going into the hells, choose fire. You're going into the polar ice caps, choose cold. You want to choose force, you could choose force. You're going up against another warlock. You don't want to get hit so hard with Eldritch Blast. Here you go. That's a very well-rounded kit that's going to just serve you extraordinarily well from the moment you get it.
The cool thing about those abilities, I think, especially Dark One's Blessing and even the Fiendish Resilience too, like they really enhance what the class is trying to do. They enhance the survivability. There's another one called Dark One's Own Luck, which essentially it allows you to add a d10 to an ability check or saving throw after you've made the roll, but before you know whether it's succeeded or failed. Let's be real. You almost always know whether it's succeeded or failed. But it's just one of those things that, like, anytime you get to add to your roll, it's kind of like a reliable talent. You can't use it as often, but like adding a d10 is a pretty big deal, and I think it's a strong enhancement.
Yeah, especially when you talk about concentrating on a key spell, and if you just happen to goof one of those checks, well, this could be the difference between keeping that up and it leaving the fight. And then when you talk about something that delivers on the fantasy, why don't we talk about the level 14 capstone called Hurl Through Hell. When you hit a creature with an attack, you can just instantly transport the target through the lower planes. And it says the creature disappears and hurtles through a nightmare landscape. At the end of your next turn, the target returns to the space it previously occupied or the nearest unoccupied space. If the target is not a fiend, it takes 10d10 psychic damage as it reels from this horrific experience. And it's a long rest feature. All you have to do is hit something. Just damage it with an attack. So Eldritch Blast, it's like an extra spell slot you got baked in there that deals 10d10 psychic damage, provided you're not fighting a fiend. Now, I guess a lot of big bosses will have fiendish nature or maybe fiendish minions, but this is still a very strong capstone, and it is absolutely on par with what you envision doing to someone when you get your power from a fiend. It's like, hey, guess what? Why don't you take a ride through hell? Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. You're on a one-way trip, pal.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the fiend is very cool. Last on our list, last alphabetically, of course. Probably the best Gish in the game, or at least it's going toe to toe with the Bard for the best Gish in the game. That's Hexblade. The raw power of Hexblade, I mean, there's right off the bat, you have Hex Warrior, which lets you use your charisma modifier on melee attacks. You also get medium armor, shields, and martial weapon proficiencies, which is that's big time, buddy. But I mean, charisma modifier on melee attacks is just kind of outrageous. That is so strong. Also a little bit silly when you really think about it. It's like you are so charming that you are good. Is that Inigo Montoya? Is that
He's a Hexblade. He's like, I have my father's sword.
The other cool thing here is I mean there's many, but in terms of raw power, armor of hexes, a really big deal. If you are hit by the target of your Hexblade's curse, you roll a d6, and if it's on a 4 or higher, which for those who are bad at math, that's 50%. It doesn't hit. It just doesn't hit. And there's, as far as I know, there's no. You could use that as many times as you want.
It's just as it's limited to the target of your Hexblade's curse, but
Yeah,
absolutely is that a wonderful, wonderful feature. And since you get Hexblade's curse once per short rest, I mean, even if you're having trouble convincing your friends for their own benefit to take a short rest, you'd be like, hey, I get a lot stronger if we do this. It's just even adding to that more, which I guess enhances what the base class wants to do. Little backdoor. However, speaking of Hexblade's curse, you are going to deal extra damage to the target that you choose equal to your proficiency bonus, and you're going to get a critical hit on a 19 or 20. I believe one of the only other features that does this is the champion fighters. And if you start looking at Eldritch invocations like, Eldritch Smite, that would be a great way to, beef up extra damage against that target. But it's also similar to the Fiend. You're going to regain hit points if the target dies. It's not temporary hit points, but if the target dies, you actually just heal for your Warlock level plus your Charisma modifier. So that is definitely something that's going to be enhancing what you're looking to do, because you want to curse someone when you're a Warlock. It's just kind of how it goes. And another thing, it's not necessarily enhancing what the base class is looking to do, but this subclass is looking to hit something with its sword or weapon. It's hex weapon. And so I really believe the Pact of the Blade should have been this, and we're going to see that in the 2024 rules, that's actually something that happens. But that's a way actually that would also deliver on the fantasy. You're selling a Warlock warrior. And so really the Hex Warrior could be in raw power, but it also could be on the delivery of a fantasy, Josh. I'm just saying.
I think it very clearly ties into to both. I'm with you on there. I mean, Hex Warrior, it's all about those dark weapons. It's all what they say, like Razor's Edge or something like that. Is or Razor Crest is in the description of the subclass. Warlocks just kind of have a naturally dark fantasy baked in. Some of the first thoughts that when you're playing one are like hexes and curses and that kind of thing. So being that the entire class is built around that, and it's also built around being that kind of magical warrior, I think the abilities all really tie into this outstanding warrior mage. And I think it really sells on that fantasy. It really does a good job of delivering on that fantasy it sells. So this is an A+ for me.
Yeah, especially when you consider how difficult sometimes your ability scores have to be spread out. Like, things the paladin might encounter, this subclass doesn't. It's like, I just need a good charisma and I'm good to go.
I think that does it for the Warlock, except for the rankings. We're going to start off right at the bottom, which is Hexblade, actually. The thing that ties me up with Hexblade, because it really is an outstanding subclass, the only thing I really want from it is Hex Warrior, to be completely honest. And maybe that's a me problem, but like if I could choose to get Hex Warrior and then combine that with almost any other subclass, except for maybe the Undying, because that's just trash.
Doo-doo butts.
yeah, exactly. No disrespect if you like it, but I mean, you're really
fantasy's
using
strong.
a subclass from Skag? Like,
Come on, man.
So I think for that reason, though, that the main draw from it is that first level feature. I think that's why it goes at number 3. But
Yeah,
they are really close, all of them, I think.
it's very strong, and we don't consider multi-classing in this, but the hexblade is easily people are like, let's take a level of warlock. You could you know, you're a bard, you're a sorcerer, whatever you want to do. It paladin is another great one. But coming in at number 2, we have the celestial. Honestly, I think between the Celestial and the Fiend, it really comes down to flavor preference. But I think the healing power that it has, it's so action economy friendly. The ability to both heal and damage or heal and control on the same turn cannot be understated. If you think about a combat lasting 3 to 5 rounds, is probably a pretty decent sweet spot. There might be maybe 3 rounds of things you could do. You're kind of doing 5 or 6, and that should not be understated just how powerful that is. But Josh, at the end of the day, it's got to be the tankiness that the Fiend offers that just separates it, right?
That's exactly what I'm thinking, right? I mean, right at Dark One's Blessing, the ability to get temp HP every time you drop a creature to 0 hit points is so massively strong. I mean, you said it before, we talked all about it. Being able to soak hit points, like, what's the best way to stay strong, to stay alive? Don't take damage.
Not get hit. Yeah,
Yeah.
you don't get
Well,
hurt.
not get hit. Yeah, I guess that's number one, right?
Yeah, well.
But you have been hit. Well, you have these temporary hit points.
If you're able to plan for the resistance ahead of time,
Yeah.
you could add that into the layer.
I think in many cases you can or you should be able to do that. Every now and then you're surprised with like a dragon on the road, but let's be real. If you're traveling through the cold, snowy mountains, maybe you should just put cold damage as the resistance, even though you don't know that you're going to fight a white dragon.
And the fact that you could change it on a short or a long rest, it's like even if the first fight of the day gets you, maybe the second fight of the day or the rest of the day won't. So
Yeah.
the Fiend is just marvelous here.
You know what I'm fiending for, Jake? I'm fiending for a good comment from one of our viewers about what their favorite Warlock subclass is. And also a reminder for everyone. I mean, obviously, one, if you didn't pick up on that, please drop a comment of your favorite subclass. Maybe you disagree, maybe you agree.
Please tell us why you agree or disagree.
Yeah,
it's always
absolutely.
better to have a conversation when we know what you're thinking.
Yeah, if you agree, then it's like, okay, I get it. Like, I agree, whatever. But if you disagree and you're just like, you're wrong, you're an idiot. So, if you want to be part of the discussion before the videos are made, join the Discord because we talk about all this kind of stuff. And there's always a fun debate going on in there. And sometimes you sway us, and that's what goes into the video. So, hopefully, we'll see you there. Links in the description. And until then, we'll see you next time. We got one more left.